I want you to picture something for me. Close your eyes if you have to. Well, unless you're driving. Please don't do that if you're driving. But imagine a machine, not just a car engine or a computer, but a machine of infinite complexity, a mechanism that spans billions of light years.
We're definitely starting big today.
We are. I'm talking about the universe itself. Imagine that every single component of this machine is calibrated to a degree of precision that makes a Swiss watch look like a pile of rocks. Every planet spinning, every star burning, every electron orbiting a nucleus, it's all following a code. A rigid, unbreakable program.
Right.
It never misses a beat. It never wakes up and decides to take a day off. It just obeys perfectly.
It's a beautiful image. It's harmonious, but it's also, if you think about it, completely involuntary. A planet doesn't get credit for orbiting the sun because it literally can't do anything else. It's compelled.
Exactly. And this is where the sources we're covering today really drop the hammer. They paint this picture of a universe in total submission to physical laws, what they call cosmic compulsion. But then right in the middle of this perfect rhythmic machinery, there's a
glitch,
a variable, a weird, unpredictable anomaly that has the audacity to look at the code and say no. A component that can see the gears turning right and decide purely out of spite or curiosity or wisdom to go left.
And that glitch, I take it.
That is us. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are wading into some truly heavy waters. We have a stack of sources that are, well, they're eclectic, to say the least.
Very much so.
We're looking at a collection of theological and philosophical texts that analyze the Quranic worldview, but they aren't just staying in the realm of ancient theology. These texts are bridging the gap between 7th century scripture and, I kid you not, the 1969 moon landing.
I know, it sounds like a totally disjointed mix, but there is a very strong thread connecting them all.
There is. Our mission today is to figure out that connection. The core argument here is a paradox. The sources argue that while the entire universe is compelled to obey God through the laws of physics, human beings are the only things in existence that are designed to be capable of disobedience.
We're the only creatures that can choose not to bow down.
Right. And we're going to understand why, according to these sources, miracles, the kind that just completely paralyze the mind, are actually considered anti-faith, and why the intellect is the supreme tool for spiritual connection.
And that's really what we're unpacking today. It's the architecture of free will. We are taking a deep dive into Surah al-Baqarah, specifically verse 256. There is no compulsion in religion.
Which is a huge verse.
It is, but the analysis here goes way beyond just the surface level of don't force people to convert.
I'm really excited to get to the eclipse story later on because it honestly flipped my understanding of religious history entirely on its head. But we have to start with the physics. The sources use this term.
Right. Absolute compulsion. To understand the human position, the sources argue you first have to understand the backdrop we're living in. The texts describe the physical universe not as a place of chaos, but as a place of absolute, unwavering submission to law.
So when they say submission, they're talking about gravity, thermodynamics, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. The sources get pretty technical here, actually. They bring up the fine-tuning of the universe.
Right.
Think about the balance required to keep a solar system running. You have centrifugal force pushing planets away and centripetal force gravity pulling them in.
It's a cosmic tug of war.
It is, but it's a stalemate that has lasted for billions of years. The sources mention this concept of fractional deviation. If the gravitational constant was slightly different, or if the speed of the Earth's rotation changed by just a tiny fraction, the whole system collapses.
So if the Earth decided to, I don't know, slow down for a coffee break, we all die.
Instantly. If the speed drops, gravity wins, and we crash into the sun. If the speed increases, centrifugal force wins, and we fly off into the dark, frozen void of space. The point the sources are making is that the planets are walking a terrifyingly thin tightrope. And this is the key. They don't know they're walking it.
They aren't stressed about it.
No. They don't wake up with anxiety.
They're communicating.
They compelled. They follow the program. The sources identify these laws of nature as God's command or His program for the physical world. The universe is Muslim in the pure linguistic sense of the word. It is in a state of taslim, or submission. It has no choice but to obey.
And this isn't just about rocks and space. The notes mention the biological world, too, the animal kingdom.
Correct. And this is where it gets a lot more relatable. The sources give the example of a fish. A fish is born, it swims, it eats, it spawns, it dies. It is entirely compelled by instinct.
A fish doesn't have an existential crisis. It doesn't wonder if it should have gone to law school instead of swimming upstream.
Precisely. A sheep eats grass because it is programmed to eat grass. It can't decide to become a carnivore. A tiger can't decide to go vegan for ethical reasons.
Right.
They are running on software that is hard-coded into their biology. There is no rebellion in the animal kingdom because there is no mechanism for choice. They're just part of the cosmic machine.
Which brings us to the anomaly, the human exception. The texts use a specific term for this, and I want to make sure I'm saying it right.
Sahibi Iktar, yes. It's a profound title. It translates roughly to possessor of the power of choice or master of will.
This is the glitch I mentioned earlier, but the sources frame it as a deliberate design choice by God, right?
Yes, and this is where the theology gets really interesting. The argument is that God is all-powerful. He created the laws of gravity that bind the stars. He created the instincts that drive the bees to build hives. Logic follows that he could have done the exact same thing for humans.
He could have hardwired us to believe.
Exactly. He could have installed a faith chip in our brains. He could have made it a biological impossibility for a human to be an atheist, just like it's a biological impossibility for a human to breathe underwater.
You just have gills for faith.
Right. We could have been programmed to wake up at dawn, pray, be charitable, and never lie, simply because our brains wouldn't allow us to do otherwise.
On paper, that sounds like a perfect world. No crime, no war, no confusion. Just 8 billion people moving in perfect harmony like a giant school of fish.
It would have been perfect. But the sources argue it would have been totally
meaningless.
Because without the ability to disobey, obedience is just physics. If a planet orbits, it's just doing what it's told. It's a robot. But if a human who has the sahibitiar, the power to say no, looks at the universe, wrestles with their ego, overcomes their greed, and chooses to align themselves with moral law, that is something else entirely.
It's the difference between a programmed response and a genuine act of love.
Exactly. The gift of being human isn't that we are forced to be good. The gift is that we have the dangerous, terrifying capacity to be bad. We have the wheel.
Yeah.
We are driving. And that makes us the only variable in the universe that actually matters.
That's a heavy realization. It makes you realize that free will isn't just freedom. It's a massive burden. It means if I mess up, it's entirely on me. I can't blame my programming.
Dangerous is definitely the right word. The sources emphasize that God took a risk, so to speak, by creating a creature that could reject him. But that risk is necessary for the relationship to be real.
And this leads us directly into that famous verse I mentioned earlier, Surah al-Baqarah, verse 256. There is no compulsion in religion. Now, I've heard this quoted 1,000 times. Usually it's in a political context. You don't force people to convert, religious freedom, that sort of thing.
And that is certainly the surface-level application. It is a legal injunction. You cannot force someone to bow at sword point and call it faith. That creates hypocrisy, not belief. If I hold a weapon to your head and tell you to recite a prayer, you'll do it. But you won't believe it. You'll just be trying to survive.
Right. That's physical coercion. But the sources we're looking at today take this way deeper. They argue this isn't just an ethical rule. It's a statement about the physics of the human mind. They distinguish between physical coercion and mental coercion.
This is one of the most fascinating parts of the text. We understand physical coercion perfectly well. Swords, guns, threats. But mental coercion is subtler. The sources argue that overwhelming someone's mind with what they call mind-paralyzing miracles is also a form of coercion.
Let's pause here because this sounds totally counterintuitive to me. Usually in religious stories, miracles are the good stuff. People always say, show me a sign. If God parted the clouds and wrote my name in fire, then I'd believe. We tend to think of miracles as the ultimate proof.
That's the traditional, or perhaps the immature, view of faith. But look at it from the perspective of Sahibi Kitiyar. If you see something so overwhelming, so undeniably supernatural, like a mountain floating in the air, or the sky turning to gold, what happens to your intellect?
It shuts down. You're just awestruck.
Exactly. Your reason is completely paralyzed. You are no longer choosing to believe. You are being bludgeoned into submission by raw power. Like the
Truck analogy.
If you're standing in the road and a huge truck is barreling toward you, you don't stand there and make a philosophical choice to jump. Your survival instinct overrides everything. You are compelled to move.
Right. I'm not making a moral decision. I'm just reacting.
The sources argue that if religion does that to you, if it dazzles you or terrifies you into submission without your intellect engaging, it's not true faith. It violates the no compulsion rule. The goal, according to these sources, is intellectual conviction. True faith requires the willing consent of the heart and mind.
So a belief that bypasses the brain isn't a belief worth having.
That is the core argument here. If the mind is paralyzed by a supernatural event it cannot understand, The resulting belief isn't genuine. It's just submission to power. And remember, the rest of the universe already submits to power. The planets submit to gravity. Animals submit to instinct. Humans are supposed to do something different. We are supposed to submit through understanding, through conscious choice.
This is a really radical shift from how we usually hear about religious history. Most religious narratives are built entirely on shock and awe, but these sources are saying that the Quran actively critiques the demand for those things.
Yes, the texts point out that historically, people always demanded supernatural signs from their prophets. They'd say, if you're really a prophet, turn this rock into gold or make the rivers flow upstream. They wanted the shortcut. They didn't want to think. They wanted to be amazed.
It's easier to be a fan at a magic show than a student in a classroom.
Precisely. And the critique here is that reliance on supernatural wonders bypasses reason. It turns the believer into a mere spectator.
Which brings us to the story I teased in the intro, the anchor anecdote about the eclipse. I have to admit, I didn't know this story in detail before reading these notes, and it really drives this point home. It's about the Prophet Muhammad, but it's a very human, grounded moment.
It's a tragic moment, actually.
Yeah.
This concerns the death of his young son, Ibrahim. He was only a toddler, about 18 months old.
Just to set the scene for you listening, you have a father who is also the leader of his people, absolutely heartbroken. He's burying his child. And coincidentally, on that very same day, a solar eclipse occurs. The sky goes dark in the middle of the day.
Now put yourself in the mindset of 7th century Arabia, or really any pre-modern society. We didn't know about orbital mechanics or the moon's shadow back then. To them, the sun was a divine, mysterious object.
And suddenly, right when the prophet's son dies, the universe goes dark. What is the immediate assumption everyone makes?
That the cosmos is mourning. That the sun is so stricken by the death of the prophet's son that it has covered its face. It's the ultimate cosmic validation of his status.
And the sources say that people really believed this.
They did. The town was buzzing. People are running around saying, look, the sun has eclipsed for the death of Ibrahim. They were interpreting it as a massive miracle. They were ready to believe in the prophet's power, not because of his actual message, but because the sky did a magic trick.
Think about the temptation there. From a leadership perspective, this is a winning lottery ticket. He didn't have to do anything. He didn't plan it. The sun just handed him absolute authority. He could have just stayed silent. He could have let them believe it. He could have said, yes, behold, even the heavens weep for my loss. He would have solidified his power instantly and permanently.
It was the ultimate test of integrity. And here is the glitch in the human system working perfectly. He chose not to exploit the superstition.
He called a town hall meeting, basically.
He gathered the people in the mosque, and he corrected them immediately. He didn't mince words at all. He said, the sun and the moon are signs of God. They follow laws. They do not eclipse for the birth or death of any human being.
That is just wow. He actively dismantled the superstition that would have given him ultimate power.
He chose the sanctity of natural law over the easy win. He refused to let their minds be paralyzed by a coincidence. He directed them right back to reason. He was essentially saying, do not believe in me because of an eclipse. Do not build your faith on a misunderstanding of astronomy.
It's actually very scientific in a way. He was decoupling the natural world from human projection.
Exactly. The expert analysis in the sources emphasizes that this was a fundamental defense of human reason. If he had let them believe the superstition, he would have been enslaving their minds. By correcting them, he was respecting their intellect. He wanted followers who understood, not followers who were just awestruck.
It's the difference between a cult leader and a teacher. A cult leader wants you overwhelmed and confused. A teacher wants you to understand the mechanism.
And that leads to a really big question. If we aren't supposed to look for signs and magic tricks or eclipses, where are we supposed to look? Because religion is all about signs.
Right. If the sun going dark isn't a sign, what is?
The sources reframe the concept entirely. The term used is afak, which translates to the horizons or the universe around us. The sources argue that the true miracles of the modern age are not supernatural disruptions, but scientific achievements.
This is where we get to the moon landing. And I have to say, I absolutely love that a serious theological text is geeking out about the Apollo missions.
It connects back to a Quranic promise that God will show his signs in the horizons until the truth becomes clear. The sources argue that the transition from seeing the moon as a supernatural object to seeing it as a physical destination is a massive form of spiritual evolution.
The notes have this timeline that I think is really cool to reflect on. It tracks the progress of our reach as a species. 1957, Sputnik, the first satellite, the first time we put something up there. Then 1961, Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space. And then 1969, Neil Armstrong stepping onto the surface.
And the sources contrast this sharply with the old superstitious worldview. There's a mention of the sphere versus plate debate, which seems hilarious to us now.
Oh, right, the idea that the moon was just a flat plate in the sky.
Yes. For centuries, in traditional lore and folklore, the moon was often seen as a flat, luminous plate, like a piece of fine china that God hung up in the sky. The myths said it could be split and put back together like a dish. It was an object of mystery, not geography.
And the text actually mocks this idea a bit. Come on, guys, we've literally been there. It's a rock.
But it's a rock that validates the intellect. There is a specific detail in the sources that I found so profound. The author marvels at the telemetry technology.
The heartbeats, right?
Yes. The fact that Armstrong and Aldrin were 240,000 miles away, standing on a completely different world, and yet back in Houston, doctors were monitoring their heartbeats. We knew their blood pressure. We knew if they were sleeping.
It really is a miracle, if you use the word correctly, but it's a miracle of math. It's a miracle of engineering.
The argument in the source is that this technology, this ability to traverse the horizons, isn't a threat to faith. It is the fulfillment of it. Reaching the moon validates that the universe is governed by laws that human intellect is uniquely capable of discovering and mastering.
So the sign isn't that the moon split in half magically. The sign is that we built a rocket, calculated the complex trajectory, survived the vacuum of space, walked on it, and came back alive. The miracle is the human mind interacting with God's laws.
Precisely. It's the ultimate validation of Sahib Ikhtiyar. We used our choice and our reason to conquer the compelled universe. We figured out the code of the cosmic machine and used it to leave the planet.
Which brings us back to the immense responsibility of that choice. If we have this incredible power, the power to crack the code of the universe, how do we know we're using it for good? We can use nuclear physics to power a city, or we can use it to level one. The sources introduce a framework for this.
Yes, this is the architecture of choice. Since humans aren't compelled like the planets, we need a compass. The sources define two distinct paths, rushed and gay.
Let's break those down. Rushed. It sounds like the English word rushed, but I assume it means something totally distinct.
It's spelled R-U-S-H-D. It translates to the right path or guidance. But the definition is very specific in these texts. It's not just about being a nice person. Rushed is a path chosen via actual intellect and ilm knowledge.
So you can't just stumble into rush.
No, that's the key. You cannot be on the path of rushed accidentally. Rushed implies conscious wisdom. You have to think your way there. You have to know why you are doing what you were doing. It's a highly active state of mind.
And
A is the opposite. This is the wrong path. But again, the nuance is key here. It's the path adopted through deception, and this is critical,
suspended reason.
it's when you just follow the crowd. It's when you inherit a belief from your parents and never bother to question it. It's when you follow a superstition just because that's what we've always done. It's when you let someone else do the thinking for you.
So blind faith, even if you're blindly following a good religion, in this framework, that would actually be gay.
Yes, because it lacks the light of intellect. It is walking in the dark. If you are just following the herd, you aren't using your Sahibi Ikhtiyar. You're acting like a sheep. And remember, God didn't create you to be a sheep. He created you to be a human.
That is a remarkably sharp distinction. And then there's the third concept, which seems to be the main antagonist of this whole story.
Taghut. This is a heavy term. It's often translated as false idol or tyrant, but the linguistic root gives us a much richer image. The root is ki ajai, which means to cross boundaries or to overflow.
The sources use a river metaphor here, which I found really helpful to visualize.
It's the best way to grasp it. Think of a river. When the water stays within its banks, it is a blessing. It nourishes the crops, it sustains the animals, it allows civilization to flourish. Water is life.
But if
If it rises too high and crosses its banks, if it commits tuck-in, it becomes a flood. The exact same water that was life-giving is now totally destructive. It wipes out the crops, it drowns the animals, it destroys the village.
So Taghut is power that has overflowed its proper banks.
Exactly. It represents rebellion against limits. In a socio-political sense, it refers to tyrants, oppressive leaders, or institutions that claim absolute power for themselves.
Now, just to be completely clear for everyone listening, we are not taking sides on any modern political interpretations here, left or right. We are strictly reporting on how the source material defines this concept of oppressive leadership.
Right. We're just unpacking the text's definition. And the text defines Taghut as A ruler or system that demands absolute submission. A ruler has a role to serve and organize. That's the river staying within the banks. But when the ruler demands total control, when they dictate what you read, what you say, what you think, they have overflowed. They have become tikkut. They're essentially trying to take the place of God.
They're trying to compel people just like the laws of physics compel the planet.
Yes. They're trying to strip people of their sahib ikhtiyar. They want to turn humans into robots who just nod and obey without questioning.
The sources say something really strong here regarding that. They say you cannot have true faith until you actively reject tikkut.
It's an absolute prerequisite. The text calls it a negation before an affirmation. You have to say no to the tyrant, no to the superstition, no to the mental slavery before you can truly say yes to God.
That's that glitch again. The ability to say no is the first step of faith. It's an act of rebellion against false authority.
And it's risky. Rejecting authority, whether it's a political tyrant or a deeply held cultural superstition, is dangerous. It gets you in trouble.
Speaking of getting in trouble for using your brain, the sources bring up a historical figure who is practically the poster child for this, Galileo.
The Galileo connection is fascinating in these texts because it serves as both a warning and a contrast.
We all know the story, but let's recap it quickly. 17th century, Galileo looks through his telescope and says, hey, the math says the Earth moves around the sun.
And the religious establishment of the time says, no. Our rigid interpretation of Scripture says the Earth is the center of the universe. You are wrong. Recant or face the consequences.
And he was put under house arrest. His books were banned.
Now, the sources use this to illustrate exactly what happens when religion becomes takat. When the religious establishment tries to suppress the intellect, it is crossing the boundary. It is overflowing its banks.
They were trying to compel belief against the clear evidence of reason.
Exactly. And look at the long-term damage that did. It created this centuries-long cultural narrative that faith and science are mortal enemies, that you have to choose. Do you want to be smart or do you want to be religious?
But the Quranic view, per these texts, is that this is a completely false dichotomy.
Completely false. The argument is that if the universe is God's cosmic machine, then studying it, whether through a telescope or a microscope, is an act of worship. The prophet's path was meant to move humanity away from superstition and toward empirical observation.
So, if you are following the spirit of these sources, you should be the very first person to look through the telescope. You should be the one cheering loudest for the moon landing.
Because suppressing knowledge in the name of God is a contradiction. It is denying the very tool, the intellect that God gave you to find him. If you silence the scientist, you are blinding yourself to the horizons.
This has been massive. We've gone from planets colliding to fish swimming to the moon landing to Galileo to the definition of tyranny. Let's try to synthesize this for you. What is the big takeaway here?
The synthesis is that the universe is a place of beautiful, terrifying order. Everything obeys, everything submits, gravity never takes a day off, but you are different.
I am the variable. I am the only thing that can mess it up.
You are the variable. You have been gifted with this dangerous, beautiful power of choice. You are not a robot. You are sahibi ikhtiyar. And that comes with
The responsibility to think.
Yes, true faith isn't about closing your eyes and hoping for a magic trick. It's not about waiting for an eclipse to prove God exists. It's about opening your eyes wide. It's about using that intellect to recognize the order in the universe, from the orbit of the moon to the rhythm of your own heartbeat.
It's about distinguishing rushed, rational truth from gay deception.
And rejecting takat. Rejecting the overflowing rivers of tyranny and superstition. Thinking is the ultimate spiritual act. In an age of information overload, where we are constantly being bombarded by attempts to manipulate us, by algorithms, by politicians, by superstitions, the ability to think clearly and to choose the truth freely, that is the highest purpose of human existence.
I love that. It makes the no compulsion verse feel so much more empowering. It's not just a rule, it's a challenge. It's God saying, I'm not going to force you. You have to figure this out.
It really is. And here is a provocative thought to leave you with, something for you to chew on after you finish listening.
Let's hear it.
The source material implies that God values a skeptic who thinks their way to the truth more than a believer who blindly follows a miracle.
Wait, really? A skeptic? That sounds pretty controversial.
Think about it. If the universe is compelled to obey, then the sun's obedience is automatic. It has no value in terms of love or loyalty. It's just mechanics.
Right. A toaster doesn't love you for plugging it in.
Exactly. But if a human wrestles with doubt, questions the narrative, uses their reason, struggles with the evidence, and then chooses to believe, that choice has real weight. That choice has value. Perhaps the only thing in existence that can offer genuine love is the one thing that has the ability to say no.
That is a lot to process, but in the best way possible. It turns doubt from a sin into a step on the ladder.
It puts the burden entirely on us, doesn't it? We have to do the work.
It does, but I think I'd rather carry the burden than be a robot.
I think we all would.
Thanks for taking the deep dive with us.
See you next time.